Poor single mom. Let a strange boy stay for one night. Unaware he was a millionaire's son. Rain had been pounding the Oregon coast all night, a relentless ocean of sound against the roof of the small rental home on Cedar Street. Inside, Claire Bennett moved quietly through her kitchen, the yellow light flickering above her as she packed her daughter's lunchbox. Peanut butter sandwich, apple slices, a folded napkin with a hand-drawn smiley face. It was nearly midnight. Her shift at Harbor Diner had just ended, and exhaustion sat heavy in her shoulders. She was about to turn off the lights when a sudden, urgent knock broke the stillness. 3 sharp raps, hesitant, then louder. She froze. In this town, unannounced visitors after dark usually meant trouble. Claire set down the lunchbox, reached for the baseball bat she kept behind the door, and peered through the peephole. A boy, 16, maybe 17, stood on her porch. Rain slicked his hair to his forehead, water dripping from the cuffs of a faded hoodie. He looked like he'd been walking for hours. When their eyes met through the glass, he took a step back, shivering. "Ma'am," he said, voice shaking. I lost my ride. My phone's dead. I just need somewhere dry for the night." Every instinct in her said no. She lived alone with her 7-year-old, Ella, who was asleep in the next room. She couldn't just let a stranger in. But the boy's face, pale, frightened, trying hard not to look desperate, tugged at something in her chest. Claire had seen that same look before, years ago, when she'd run from a life that fell apart overnight. She cracked the door open just enough to talk. "You got any ID?" she asked. The boy shook his head. "Wallet's gone. Bus stop was empty. I'll leave by sunrise, I promise." His voice was polite, too measured for someone his age. Not drunk, not high, just lost. Claire hesitated, then made the kind of choice you only make when your heart overrules fear. "Wait here," she said. She dialed the non-emergency line, explaining the situation to the operator. A teenage boy, stranded, no sign of danger, needs a safe place till morning. They noted the report. Claire also texted her neighbor, Mrs. Alvarez, across the street. "Stray teen on my couch tonight. Let you know if anything weird." The reply came fast. "You're brave, Claire. Keep the porch light on." She unlocked the door fully. "You can come in, but listen carefully," she said firmly. "The couch is where you sleep. My daughter's room stays locked. Lights out at 10. Deal?" The boy nodded quickly, rainwater pooling at his feet. "Yes, ma'am, thank you." He stepped inside, cautious, glancing around the small living room with its second-hand furniture and the smell of cinnamon candles. He didn't say much as she handed him an old towel and one of Ella's oversized hoodies that had belonged to her ex's son years ago. "Bathroom's down the hall," she said. "There's hot water if you turn the knob all the way left." When he came back, hair damp, eyes clearer, she was waiting with a steaming mug of cocoa. "What's your name?" she asked. "Noah," he said after a pause. "Noah Grant." She nodded slowly. "I'm Claire, and that's all you need to know tonight." He sat on the edge of the couch, both hands cupping the mug, as if afraid to spill gratitude. Claire noticed the way he kept glancing toward the window, flinching every time headlights passed. Not runaway wild, but wary, like someone raised on rules, suddenly lost without them. She wrote a note on a scrap of paper and set it beside the cocoa before heading to her room. "If you need anything, knock on the wall. My daughter's a light sleeper." Then she turned the lock on Ella's door, peeked in at her little girl curled under a blanket covered in stars, and whispered a silent prayer that she wasn't being naive. Back in her own room, the storm's rhythm filled the silence. She tried to sleep, but couldn't. Her mind replayed the boy's trembling voice, the fear hiding behind his manners. Who was he running from? Why did his name sound oddly familiar? At 1 a.m., she rose again and peeked down the hallway. The couch light was off. Noah was asleep, half covered by the quilt, the empty mug on the table beside him. For a moment, he looked younger, like someone's son who'd just lost his way home. Claire exhaled slowly, tension easing just enough for her to whisper, "You're safe here, kid." She turned off the last lamp, and as thunder rolled beyond the glass, the rain began to soften. Somewhere between exhaustion and faith, Claire decided she could live with her choice. After all, kindness had always been the only thing she could afford to give. By morning, the storm had drifted out to sea, leaving the sky washed pale and the streets glistening. Claire woke to the faint sound of movement, soft footsteps in the kitchen, a cabinet closing gently. She reached for her robe, half expecting trouble, but stopped at the doorway. Noah stood there, awkward and careful, trying to pour cereal into a chipped bowl. He froze when he saw her. "Sorry," he said quickly, voice low. "Didn't mean to wake you. I was just hungry." Claire blinked, still sleepy. "You're fine," she said. "There's pancake mix in the cupboard. Easier than cereal that's mostly air." He smiled, unsure if she was joking. She watched him reach for the box, his movements oddly precise for a kid who'd supposedly been wandering all night. The way he held the spatula, the way he cleaned up spills immediately, it was as if he'd been trained to keep things spotless, to make no mess in the world. "Smells good," a small voice piped up. Ella appeared in her pajamas, curls tangled, rubbing her eyes. When she saw Noah, she grinned fearlessly. "You're the guy from the couch," she said. "Mom said I couldn't talk to strangers, but you're not strange anymore, right?" Claire nearly choked on her coffee. "Ella," she warned. Noah laughed softly, the kind of laugh that made you forget it was early morning. "Guess I'm not, if I'm making breakfast." Ella climbed onto a chair beside him. "Can I help?" "Sure," he said. "You're in charge of pancakes shaped like stars." The kitchen filled with the sizzle of batter, the scent of butter, and Ella's giggles. Claire leaned against the counter, watching them. For the first time in months, the house felt alive. Normally mornings were silent except for the hum of the old fridge and Ella's cartoon voices in the background. But now there was laughter echoing off the walls, and something in Claire's chest loosened. When the pancakes were done, Noah carried plates to the table with quiet precision. He even wiped down the counter, folded the towel, and stacked the dishes like he'd done this routine 1,000 times. "You're a guest, not staff?" Claire teased. "Force of habit," he replied. "My dad. He doesn't like clutter." The sentence trailed off like he hadn't meant to say it. Claire caught the pause but didn't press. As they ate, she noticed how he chewed slowly, how he thanked her for every small thing. The syrup, the milk, even the napkin. Not entitled, just careful. When he finished, he stood to rinse his plate. "You don't have to," Claire said. "I owe you one," he answered simply, turning on the faucet. She looked down at her coffee, realizing it had gone cold in her hand. "So," she said, breaking the silence, "you said your uncle's coming for you?" He nodded. "That's the plan." "Where's home?" she asked. A beat passed. "Portland," he said finally. "Kind of." Ella was drawing something on her napkin. She slid it toward Noah. "It's you," she said proudly. He looked down, a stick figure with spiky hair holding hands with a little girl. Between them, a yellow star. That's for you, she added, so you don't get lost again. He smiled, genuinely this time. I'll keep it safe. Claire saw him fold the napkin carefully, tucking it into his pocket as if it were made of gold. Later, when she walked him to the door, he hesitated, glancing back at the small house. The hand-drawn pictures on the fridge, the shoes lined neatly by the mat, the faint smell of cinnamon and soap. "You're sure you're okay out there?" she asked. He nodded. "Yes, ma'am, thank you. For last night and breakfast." Then, as if remembering something, he added, "It's been a while since anyone asked if I was okay." He started down the porch steps, hands deep in his hoodie pocket. Claire watched from the doorway, the morning light catching on his damp hair. Something about his walk, measured, controlled, didn't fit his story. She should have felt relieved that he was leaving, but instead, she felt an ache she couldn't name. As she closed the door, Ella's voice drifted from the kitchen. "Mom, do you think he'll come back?" Claire smiled faintly. "People who need kindness usually do." She looked at the sofa, still indented where he'd slept, the empty mug still on the table, and the folded blanket she hadn't yet put away. The air smelled faintly of syrup and rain. For a moment the quiet returned, but it wasn't the same kind of quiet as before. It was warmer somehow, like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Claire picked up the note she'd written the night before and smiled. "If you need anything, knock on the wall." Maybe she hadn't just written it for him. Maybe she'd written it for herself, too. Outside, the clouds were breaking apart, sunlight slipping through the cracks. Somewhere down the road, the boy with the star in his pocket was walking toward a world that didn't yet know how much he needed that light. The next few days slipped by in that strange rhythm small towns have. Mornings at the diner, afternoons folding laundry, nights too quiet to fill. Noah stayed longer than Claire expected. The storm had knocked out several cell towers along the coast, he said, and his uncle hadn't been able to reach him. She wasn't sure whether to believe him. But Ella didn't care. Every afternoon after school, the little girl came home and shouted, "Is he still here?" And he'd grin from the sofa, pencil in hand, sketching something no one else could see. One Thursday evening, after closing her shift at Harbor Diner, Claire found Noah still awake, sitting by the window with the lamp casting soft light across his face. His sketchbook rested on his knees, pages covered in lines that curved like waves, then rose into towers of glass and steel. It wasn't doodling. It was architecture, intricate and deliberate, every shadow mapped out. She stood behind him quietly, watching. "You draw cities," she said finally. "Cities that look expensive." Noah startled a little, closing the book halfway. "Habit, I guess," he murmured. "It's what I grew up around." Claire leaned on the doorframe. "You said your dad works in construction." "Something like that," he said, not meeting her eyes. "He builds things, big things. I draw the parts he forgets, like where people are supposed to fit in." She frowned. "That sounds lonely." "It is," he admitted, a small, sad laugh escaping. "But paper listens better than most people." The wind pressed against the windows. From the kitchen, the faint hum of the fridge filled the silence. Claire hesitated, then walked over and set a mug of cocoa next to him. "You should sleep," she said gently. "Storm's not coming back tonight." He looked up, eyes soft but tired. "You ever feel like you left a place before it left you?" he asked. She blinked. "All the time," she said quietly. "That's what starting over means." When she turned to leave, something slipped from between the sketchbook's pages, a torn photo of a man in a dark suit standing beside a glass building. On the frame's edge, she caught the embossed initials GG before Noah snatched it back. His fingers trembled slightly. "Sorry," she said quickly. "Didn't mean to pry." "It's fine," he muttered, slipping the photo into his jacket. "Just my dad. He hates that picture." Later that night, while cleaning up the living room, Claire noticed the edge of the sketchbook peeking from his open backpack. Curiosity tugged harder than manners. She flipped through a few pages, drawings of bridges, glass facades, and in one corner, a smaller sketch of her and Ella eating breakfast, a stack of pancakes between them. Above it, a tiny star sticker glowed faintly under the lamp's light. She smiled before she could stop herself. Ella padded out from her room, clutching her stuffed rabbit. "Mom, can I give him something?" she whispered. "Like what?" "My glow star," she said, opening her palm to reveal one of the stickers she'd stuck to her nightlight. "So he doesn't get lost." Claire hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, sweetheart, but wait till morning." The next day, when Noah came back from a walk to the docks, Ella was waiting at the door. She stuck the glow star right onto the corner of his sketchbook. "Now your ideas won't get lost either," she said proudly. Noah laughed, touched, though his voice wavered a little. "Thank you, Ella. That's the best blueprint anyone's ever given me." That night, as Claire did the dishes, she glanced through the window. Noah sat on the porch steps, sketchbook in his lap, drawing by the porch light. The sea breeze lifted his hair, and for a moment, he looked like he belonged there, like a piece of her world that had wandered in from another. But there was something else too, something unspoken in the way he stared out toward the dark horizon. A sadness too old for someone his age. She opened the screen door. "You all right?" He closed the book, the motion almost guilty. "Yeah, just thinking." "About home?" she asked. He nodded. "Sometimes it's easier to breathe when you're far away from it." His sleeve slid slightly as he adjusted the book, and she noticed a faint scar across his wrist, a thin white line disappearing beneath the cuff. "You hurt yourself?" she asked before she could stop. He looked down, startled, then smiled faintly. "No, just something sharp I held on to too long." Claire didn't press. She just sat beside him, the night air cool against their skin, the waves whispering somewhere beyond the trees. "You can stay till things settle," she said finally. "I don't mind." He didn't look at her, but his jaw tightened like he was holding back tears. "People always mind eventually," he said softly. She turned toward him, voice steady. "Not all people." Inside, Ella had left her nightlight glowing. Its small blue star shone through the window, faint but steady, a reminder that some lights didn't need to be bright to be found. By the time the weekend came, the air along the Oregon coast had turned crisp and bright, the kind of morning that smelled faintly of salt and coffee. Claire opened Harbor Diner at 6 as usual, flipping chairs down and setting napkin holders in place. When she turned, she nearly jumped. Noah was already there, sleeves rolled up, broom in hand. "You shouldn't be here this early," she said. "I didn't sleep much," he admitted. "Thought I'd make myself useful." She wanted to tell him to go home, to rest, but the truth was she didn't mind the company. Since the storm, the boy had become part of their small routine. Quiet breakfasts, Ella's laughter, sketches left on napkins. As customers trickled in, Noah carried trays and refilled water glasses without being asked. He was good at it. Too good. He handled each plate with focus, each interaction with careful politeness. When Claire caught him automatically calculating change in his head, she teased, "You sure you've never done this before?" "Only in theory," he said with a small grin. "Guess some habits don't care where you are." There was pride in his tone, but also an ache beneath it. Around mid-morning, the old espresso machine coughed and sputtered. Again. Claire sighed. "She's on her last leg." Noah crouched beside it, inspecting the outlet. "I can fix this," he said. "Robotics club, remember?" "Be careful," she warned, reaching for a towel to wipe her hands. "That wiring's ancient." He didn't listen. The plug sparked suddenly, a sharp pop slicing through the chatter of the diner. Without thinking, Claire grabbed his sleeve, yanking him backward. The spark flared, then died. She stumbled, catching the edge of the counter, and a line of pain stung across her wrist where the heat had kissed her skin. "Are you okay?" Noah's voice cracked with panic. He grabbed the towel, pressing it gently over her wrist. "You could have been hurt because of me." "It's fine," she said, trying to steady her voice. "I've burned myself worse on pie trays." But he wasn't convinced. His hands shook as he opened his backpack and pulled out a small first aid kit, bandaging the red mark with surprising skill. That's when she noticed it, the gold watch on his wrist catching the light. It wasn't a cheap one. The engraving glinted in the sunbeam. "To Noah, GG." She looked up, her expression soft but curious. "Family?" He froze, eyes flickering toward the window. "Something like that." For a second, the boy who had seemed so calm and polite looked completely unguarded, like someone carrying a secret that was too heavy for him. Claire didn't push. "You've got steady hands for a kid," she said instead, smiling. He glanced down at the bandage, then back at her. "Guess I had to learn how to fix things when they broke." By noon, the diner was bustling again, and the accident became a story they both pretended to laugh about. But something had changed. Claire caught Noah glancing at her bandaged wrist, guilt clouding his face. Between orders, she touched the wrap and said lightly, "Hey, it's not your fault. Things spark sometimes. You just learn to pull the plug faster next time." That made him smile again. Just barely, but it was enough. After closing, she found him still wiping tables long after everything gleamed. "You've done enough, kid," she said, flipping off the neon sign. "You keep this up and I'll have to start paying you." He shrugged. "You already did." "How's that?" "You gave me a place where I don't feel like a mistake." The words landed deeper than he probably meant them to. Claire felt her throat tighten. "You're not a mistake, Noah. You're just figuring out where you fit." "We all are." When they stepped outside, the late afternoon light spilled gold over the wet pavement. Claire locked up the diner and noticed the faint tremor in his hands, the way he rubbed the edge of his watch when he thought she wasn't looking. "You nervous about something?" she asked. "No," he said too quickly. "Just cold." She nodded, though the evening was still warm. As they walked home, Ella ran ahead with her backpack bouncing, picking up seashells from puddles. Noah carried her jacket for her, and Claire noticed how natural it looked. This strange boy who'd wandered into their lives now walking alongside her daughter, as if he belonged there. She didn't know what it meant, or how long it would last, but for the first time in years, she didn't feel entirely alone. Later that night, after Ella had fallen asleep, Claire stood at the sink rinsing dishes. Through the window, she saw Noah in the yard, pacing under the porch light, phone in hand, its screen glowing faintly. He pressed a few buttons, then stopped, staring at the contact name before turning the device off. For a long moment he stood there, shoulders hunched, head tilted toward the dark sky. Then he whispered something she couldn't hear. When he came back inside, his eyes were red, but his smile was the same polite one she'd seen that first night. "Everything okay?" she asked quietly. He nodded. "Yeah, just needed some air." She didn't believe him, but she also didn't ask. Everyone, she knew, had storms they didn't want to name. That night, as she lay in bed, Claire stared at the faint glow of Ella's nightlight through the hallway, the tiny blue star shining against the wall. She realized Noah's watch, his sketches, even the way he spoke. It all pointed to a world so different from hers. Yet somehow, their paths had crossed in a way that felt almost inevitable. She turned onto her side, listening to the ocean's soft roar, and whispered into the dark, "Who are you really, Noah Grant?" Monday morning came with a chill wind sweeping off the bay, the kind that carried salt and silence in equal measure. Claire opened Harbor Diner as usual, but the air felt different, heavy, tense, as though the tide itself was holding its breath. Noah was quiet too. He'd been up since dawn, sketchbook open but untouched. When she asked if he was okay, he only said, "I think today's the day someone finds me." The words unsettled her, though she didn't understand why. By lunchtime, the diner was busier than usual. Locals crowded the booths. The radio hummed soft country tunes, and Ella sat in her corner with crayons, drawing the ocean. Claire was refilling coffee when she noticed Noah standing by the window, gaze fixed on something outside. Following his line of sight, she saw it, a sleek black SUV idling by the curb. The car didn't belong here. The door swung open, and a man stepped in, a presence that immediately shifted the room's air. Tall, silver-haired, wearing a charcoal suit that didn't know the meaning of rain or dust. His expression was cut from steel. "Noah Grant," he said, voice low but commanding. "We're leaving." The chatter in the diner went still. Claire turned to Noah, who'd gone pale. "Dad," he said softly. "Don't do this here." Graham Grant's eyes flicked toward Claire, assessing her like she was an obstacle. "This is where you've been hiding? In a diner?" he said, disdain curling through each syllable. "You've caused enough chaos, Noah. Get in the car." Claire set down the coffee pot, pulse rising. "Excuse me, sir, this isn't your house. You don't get to barge in and—" "And what?" Graham cut in sharply. "You think you know what's best for him. You don't even know who he is." "I know he's someone who needed help," Claire said, her voice steady. "That's enough for me." The customers were staring now, forks frozen mid-air. Even the radio seemed to have gone silent. Noah stepped between them. "Dad, please, she didn't do anything wrong." "She took you in," Graham said. "That's wrong enough." Claire's eyes flashed. "I opened my door to a boy standing in the rain. If that's a crime, then I'll keep committing it." Graham turned his gaze on her, cold and calculating. "You run a diner. You don't understand what danger looks like." "Oh, I understand it," she shot back. "It's the kind that wears a suit and calls kindness a mistake." The air snapped between them. For a moment, no one moved. Then Graham's jaw tightened. "Noah," he said again, quieter now but laced with warning. "You're coming home. I won't repeat myself." Noah's hands balled at his sides. "Home?" he said bitterly. "You mean the place with alarms on every door? The house that's always quiet because you're never in it?" Graham's eyes flickered, but he didn't answer. Claire could see the tremor in Noah's voice, anger mixed with hurt, the kind that only came from family. "You've had your say," Graham told him. Get your things. Noah looked at Claire, desperation flashing in his eyes. Thank you, he whispered, voice breaking. For everything. Claire reached for his arm. You don't have to go if you don't want to. He does, Graham said sharply. He's still a minor. The finality in his tone cut deep. Claire stepped back, heart sinking as Noah followed his father toward the door. But just before he stepped out, Noah turned and said softly, to her more than anyone else, You showed me what real feels like. Then he was gone. The door closed with a sharp click, and the diner filled with murmurs. Mrs. Alvarez from across the street whispered, Was that really? But Claire didn't answer. She just stared at the window, watching the SUV disappear down the street. The reflection of her own face stared back at her, tired, helpless, but still burning with something that refused to fade. Ella tugged at her sleeve. Mom, is he coming back? Claire knelt down, brushing her daughter's hair gently. I don't know, sweetheart, she said, forcing a smile, but I hope he finds what he's looking for. When they got home that night, the house felt too quiet. The sofa was still creased where Noah had slept, the blanket folded neatly on the armrest. His sketchbook was gone, but a small paper remained on the coffee table. One of Ella's drawings, the stick figures holding hands under a yellow star. In the corner, a single line written in careful handwriting. Thank you for giving me something money never did. Peace. Claire read it twice before tucking it into a kitchen drawer, the one she opened when she needed courage. Outside, the rain had started again, soft and steady. She stood by the window, watching the drops trace paths down the glass, whispering to the dark, Be safe, kid. In her chest, a quiet ache formed, something between pride and loss. She didn't know what would come next, only that some people left, but their presence stayed behind, like light that refused to fade even after the sun was gone. The days after Noah's departure felt quieter than they should have. Harbor Diner ran as usual. The ocean still breathed its salt into the wind, but something was missing. The sketchbook left behind, the laugh that had once filled the kitchen. Claire tried to convince herself it was better this way. He was back where he belonged, in a world that could afford him. Still, every time she saw a black SUV pass down Main Street, her heart jumped before her mind caught up. Ella, too, noticed the silence. She stopped drawing at the kitchen table and began leaving her crayons untouched. One night, Claire found her sitting by the window, clutching the napkin drawing of the three of them beneath the yellow star. You miss him, don't you? Claire asked. Ella nodded. He didn't even get to finish the pancakes he promised, she whispered. Claire smiled faintly and tucked a blanket around her. Maybe he'll come back for breakfast someday. But she didn't believe her own words. Then one Friday evening, the world turned again. Ella came home from school coughing, a dry wheezing sound that clawed through her small chest. By midnight, the cough had turned into gasps. Claire drove her to the hospital, rain lashing the windshield, wipers thudding like a heartbeat. Hang on, baby, she whispered, squeezing Ella's hand. We're almost there. Under the harsh fluorescent lights of the ER, doctors rushed her daughter away for oxygen. Claire stood at the desk, answering questions, signing forms with shaking hands. When the nurse asked for insurance, her heart sank. The new policy from her diner job hadn't taken effect yet. The clerk's voice was apologetic but firm. We'll need a deposit to admit her overnight. $6,000 minimum. Claire's throat went dry. She pulled out her wallet, barely $100 in cash, the tips she'd saved for rent. Please, she said, I'll find a way to pay the rest. Just don't stop treating her. The nurse hesitated. We can keep her in observation for a few hours, but without the payment, don't say it, Claire cut in, tears burning her eyes. She's 7. Just, please. The nurse looked away, the kind of look that said rules were rules. Claire's world blurred. She pressed her palms against the counter, trembling. Then a voice behind her said quietly, "The payment's been made." Claire turned. A young administrator stood there holding a white envelope. "Everything's covered," she said, handing it over. "Room, medication, tests, all cleared under the Grant Family Foundation's emergency fund." Claire blinked. "What? There must be a mistake." "No mistake," the woman replied. "Anonymous donor. All documentation signed." She left the envelope on the counter and disappeared into the hallway before Claire could ask another word. Hands shaking, Claire opened it. Inside was a hospital receipt stamped paid in full and a smaller envelope within. Her breath caught as something familiar slid into her palm. The tiny star keychain that had once hung from Ella's school bag. Attached was a note in neat, slanted handwriting, for the woman who opened her door when no one else would. N.G. Claire pressed a hand to her mouth, tears flooding before she could stop them. He'd come back, not in person, but in the way that mattered. He'd remembered. He'd kept his promise in the only language he knew, action, quiet and deliberate. She sat in the waiting room, the star keychain glinting under the fluorescent light, and whispered, "Thank you, Noah." Hours later, when the doctor emerged, his tone was calm. "It's an asthma flare, likely from the weather change. We're keeping her overnight, but she's stable." Claire exhaled for the first time in hours, sinking into the chair. Through the window, the rain had stopped. The clouds were thinning, and the first hint of dawn touched the sky. Inside the hospital room, Ella slept peacefully, her small chest rising and falling to the rhythm of the monitor's soft beep. Claire sat beside her, tracing the lines of her daughter's fingers, the keychain resting on her lap. She imagined Noah somewhere in a city far from here, perhaps looking out at another skyline, knowing his gesture had reached her. As dawn broke, a nurse came in to check vitals. "You're lucky, ma'am," she said gently. "That donor program rarely responds that fast." Claire smiled faintly. "Yeah," she murmured. "I guess we both got lucky." She looked at Ella again, sleeping under a thin hospital blanket, and then at the little star that had found its way home. It shimmered faintly in the morning light, a quiet promise that kindness didn't vanish just because someone left. It traveled, circled back, and found you when you needed it most. By the time the sun rose fully over the horizon, Claire leaned back in the chair, exhaustion finally pulling her under. The star keychain rested against her heart, still warm from her hand. In the hallway outside, nurses began their morning rounds, and the world moved on as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But Claire knew better. Sometimes miracles didn't arrive with trumpets or angels. Sometimes they came in the form of a simple envelope, and a boy who hadn't forgotten what it meant to be seen. Spring arrived along the Oregon coast with soft winds that carried the scent of salt and new beginnings. Harbor Diner, once dim and fading, now gleamed with fresh paint and polished counters. A bright sign above the door read, "Rebuilt with love." Claire stood at the entrance, tying a ribbon of blue and white balloons as Ella twirled nearby in her sunflower dress. The diner had reopened after a brief renovation, funded partly by a new community initiative called the Harbor Renewal Fund. The donors preferred to stay anonymous, but Claire knew. Every brushed steel fixture, every new chair, whispered his name. Noah Grant. The town had turned out for the reopening. Fishermen in flannel shirts, neighbors carrying pies, even Mrs. Alvarez with her camera ready. "You did it, honey," she said, hugging Claire tightly. "You built something that shines again." Claire smiled, her eyes catching the morning sun on the window's edge. "Not alone," she said softly. As the ribbon cutting began, Ella climbed onto a chair and clapped loudly. "Mom, it's perfect!" she shouted. Claire laughed, tugging the ribbon free. The crowd cheered as the door opened. Then Ella's voice rose again, excited and breathless. "Mom, look who's here!" Standing by the doorway, framed by the bright light outside, was Noah. Older somehow, though only months had passed. His hair neater, his shoulders straighter. He wore a simple gray jacket, not the expensive kind, and in his hand were 2 cups of cocoa from the cafe across the street. For a heartbeat, Claire couldn't move. It was like seeing the ghost of a wish she'd made and forgotten. He walked closer, offering one of the cups. "Still 2 sugars and a dash of cinnamon?" he asked with a small, nervous smile. "You remembered," she said, taking it. "Guess I'm not the only one who does." "I tried to forget," he admitted quietly. "Didn't work." Ella ran straight into him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "You came back," she said, her voice muffled against his jacket. He knelt, smiling, pulling something from his pocket. A tiny silver star keychain, polished and engraved. "To the girl who showed me what home feels like." Ella gasped, holding it up to the sunlight. "It matches mine," she said. "Now you can't get lost either." Claire's eyes glistened. "You didn't have to do all this," she said. "The diner, the hospital." Noah shook his head. "I wanted to," he replied. "You once said starting over means leaving a place before it leaves you. I think I finally understand that. My dad's learning too." He nodded toward the street. Parked a little ways off was the same black SUV, but this time Graham Grant stood beside it. Not in a suit, but in a windbreaker, sleeves rolled. When his eyes met Claire's, there was no arrogance, only quiet acknowledgement. He stepped forward, extending a folded receipt. "The last invoice," he said, "paid in full, but I added something extra for your staff's healthcare plan. Consider it overdue gratitude." Claire took it, unsure what to say. Graham turned to his son. "You made this place real, Noah. That's something money can't buy." Then, to Claire, "Thank you for giving him a roof when I forgot how to give him a home." Before she could respond, he gave a brief nod and walked back to the car, leaving the 2 of them standing in the morning light. Inside, laughter and chatter filled the diner. Ella was at the counter now, showing customers her new keychain. Noah watched her and said softly, "She's got your strength." Claire smiled. "No, she's got her own. She just reminds me how to use mine." For a while, they stood together in the easy quiet that only forgiveness can build. Then Noah glanced around at the families eating, the photos on the walls, the smell of pancakes mixing with sea breeze. "It's beautiful here," he said. "It's honest," she corrected gently. "That's better than beautiful." The bell above the door chimed again as the morning rush began. Claire reached for a tray. Noah caught her hand instead. "Let me help," he said. "You don't owe me anything," she whispered. "I know," he said, "but I'd like to stay anyway." Outside, the ocean stretched blue and endless beyond the harbor, gulls circling overhead. Claire looked out through the diner's window, the same one where she had once watched the rain blur her world, and saw something she hadn't in a long time. Light, steady, and certain. As she poured coffee for the next customer, Ella's laughter carried through the room like music. Noah handed out plates, and for the first time, the small diner felt like a home that belonged to all three of them. Later that afternoon, when the last guests had left, Claire flipped the sign to closed and leaned against the counter. "You know," she said, "I used to think kindness just disappeared into the world, like it evaporated." Noah looked at her, smiling softly. "Maybe it doesn't disappear," he said. "Maybe it circles back when you least expect it." Claire nodded, eyes bright. "Guess that's what home really is, a place where kindness comes back." Sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can rebuild more than walls. It can rebuild hearts. If this story touched you, share it with someone who still believes in second chances and the quiet miracles of ordinary people. Midus Stories, where love finds its way home.